In this section, we'll look how FDR's first 100 days dealt with the problems of farmers and the problems of workers. Obviously, the long-standing problem of farmer overproduction and deflation concerned FDR in his first 100 days, and actually it resulted in one of the most important and controversial New Deal programs, the Agricultural Adjustment Act of May 1933, the AAA. I should note that be careful, and you shouldn't confuse the Agricultural Adjustment Act with Hoover's Agricultural Marketing Act. Anyway, as the New Deal began, there was a debate over the tactics, how to solve the problem. One side said the key was not in limiting production, but rather in stabilizing prices by selling overseas. The others said that the other countries are too poor to buy enough to really stabilize the American agricultural economy, and it was better to simply to find a way to limit production. Ultimately, with the AAA, the advocates of limited production won out, and its goal, the AAA's goal, was to sort of stabilize prices back to where they were during good times between 1909 and 1914 by, as I just said, limiting production. The Agricultural Adjustment Act created the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. And what the Agricultural Adjustment Administration would do is it got together local committees of farmers, and they decided production limits on various crops. And, cotton, wheat, livestock, various commodities, given one's acreage. And to encourage that compliance with cutting production, which of course required you to leave part of your land fallow, was to pay them a check, pay them a subsidy. And with the subsidy, you'd get better compliance without people overproducing. The money for these subsidies would come from a tax on food processors, those who bought the farm produce and turned it into the food we see in the stores. The program succeeded in raising prices, but it ultimately proved a public relations debacle. The farm income actually doubled because of the AAA 1932-1935, but the press highlighted farmers plowing under the crops and slaughtering pigs to meet their quota. And this was at a time when people in the cities were going hungry, so it was a difficult thing to try to explain. After some great weather, there were nevertheless there was a bumper crop in 1934 of cotton and several commodities, and it actually prompted the administration to tighten the limits on those products. To help the workers whose hours were being cut and their wages were being cut, FDR passed in the first 100 days the National Industrial Recovery Act, the NIRA, in June 1933. The goal, of course, was to raise prices and wages. And it called for the leaders of the major industries to get together and to draft regulations for their industries. They called these regulations codes of fair competition. And these codes of fair competition would prescribe wages and working conditions and forbid price cutting and unfair competitive practices. It would keep the wages and hours up. The law granted industry leaders setting the codes immunity from antitrust prosecution. Running the code-setting process and enforcement and whatnot was a new federal agency, the National Recovery Administration, or the NRA. It was made up of business leaders and was, and therefore, kind of in a sense, self-regulating. The NRA was led by the able administrator Hugh Johnson. Johnson was a retired general who'd served on World War I's War Industries Board, and he had a lot of experience. Johnson led a whirlwind national campaign to build up support for the NRA and its codes. Participation in the codes was voluntary. So Johnson realized the need to keep up public pressure for compliance. And he organized parades and advertised in billboards and magazines. And it says it was patriotic for Americans to shop at stores that joined the NRA that agreed to abide by the codes of fair competition. The NRA had a symbol, a blue eagle, and every business that agreed to abide by the codes of the competition within their industry got a blue eagle to put up in their store window. And that meant to consumers that that store was paying its employees a higher wage. And the idea was that the consumers would be willing to pay more for a product knowing that business was paying their workers more. And who knows, those workers with a higher paycheck may shop at the consumer's store anyway, their own store. So we were all in it together, and we all do our part. Title VII of the National Industrial Recovery Act created another public works project. This one designed not just for young men, but laid off industrial workers, the Public Works Administration, the PWA. The law appropriated $3.3 billion for a new program of hiring workers, mainly construction workers. To help pay for the new programs, FDR supported the Economy Act of March 1933. That cut federal workers' salaries, slashed veterans' benefits and pensions, and otherwise tried to reduce the federal budget. It sort of demonstrated that FDR was still concerned about debt, and the Democrats had said in the 32 campaign that promised a balanced budget. It didn't balance the budget, but it showed that FDR had not yet as fully accepted Keynesian economics. He's still worried about the debt. By the end of the first 100 days, the public was awash in a sea of new federal agencies. People began to refer to them as, quote, the alphabet soup agencies. You had the PWA, the AAA, the CCC, blah, blah, blah. One cartoonist portrayed a harried Uncle Sam trying to juggle a dozen or more telephones, each labeled with the initials of an agency. In the first 100 days, FDR deliberately portrayed the New Deal as, kind of like a war. They were fighting poverty, fighting depression. They used a lot of war metaphors, doing battle against the depression, and they appealed to patriotic fervor. There were boards and agencies that were kind of similar to those that had been created during World War I. This concludes the section on how FDR tried to help the workers and the farmers in the first 100 days.